Sam Kahn, theathletic.com, who's here. I'm Sam. Have I ever not texted you on a day in which I was on the show to let you know that we were on you were on our show?
No, you've always done it every time, and I think you didn't do it today. And I'm not blaming you because I have it on my calendar. And today, it's a very beautiful day. I was outside, and it just totally slipped my mind. So I share in the responsibility.
Okay,
here.
No,
good. Here's the thing, Sam. Usually, as you know, on Fridays, it's me alone. Like when you're here, they're doing high school football. They have a bye week this week, so they're here and, wrecking our party on Friday. So he was trying to blame me, but I'm glad that this is a three pronged.
He
thing.
forgot to remind you.
I did totally forget.
Which is what we do. And so, Sam, it's good. You got a game. Which game are you covering, or are you just kind of watching all of them?
I am not at a game this weekend. We actually have Chris Fanini and Seth Emerson will be at Texas, Georgia. I've been on the road the last 2 weekends, so I really could use a weekend not on the road. So I'll be just kind of monitoring all of it and looking forward to it.
All right, well, let's discuss Texas and OU. And, of course, we'll get into the Big 12 games too, and there's some other ones around the country. But Texas hasn't been pushed because they've been good. Michigan wasn't quite who they, of course, way down from last year. They just routed Oklahoma. Your thoughts about them? Do you see any weaknesses, or do we not know, and we may not even know this weekend?
Yeah, that's the thing about Texas. And I've talked to a few coaches. We did a Coaches Confidential this morning on the Texas-Georgia game where I talked to 4 coaches and asked for their thoughts about these teams. And that's the sentiment that has been interesting to me, is that there really aren't very many weaknesses on this Texas team. Now, you're right. They have not been tested because Michigan really didn't have a passing game. Oklahoma's passing game was very underwhelming because they were starting a true freshman quarterback. So that secondary, which right now I think is number 1 in the country in fewest explosive plays allowed, hasn't really been tested by somebody of the caliber that Carson Beck will. That said, when you watch them, even independent of competition, I'm a believer that even if the competition is not good, if you've watched enough ball, you can tell which teams really are good regardless of the level of competition they're playing and which ones are just getting by on their schedule. And I think I look at Texas as a team that I think is very good from top to bottom, regardless of who they played. Now, if I'm looking for weaknesses or things that could pop up, I'm looking at running back, where they have been nicked up a little bit throughout this season. Of course, they lost a couple guys before the season. The depth there is just not there. I think their talent is there. I think Trey Wisner has emerged really well, and that game last week against Oklahoma was big, but they're just not super deep. Jaden Booth's been in and out of the lineup. Trey Wisner got hurt a little bit. They've got true freshman Jared Gibson. They've had to move Ryan Niblett over there. So that's one spot that I look at. The other spot that I'm curious to see is the interior defensive line. Vernon Broughton and Alfred Collins have been terrific this year. The rotational guys they brought in have been really solid. They're not as dynamic as Tavondre Sweat and Byron Murphy are, but right now they don't have to be because Texas is winning with putting points on the board. They're winning by rushing the passer, and they're doing a good job against the run. They're not as dominant, but they play within the system, and they do what they're supposed to do. So I'll be curious if Georgia wants to really run at them and hand the ball to Trevor Etienne and those big backs that are hard to bring down, can they answer the bell? That I'd be curious to see that this weekend.
Sam, tonight, BYU and Oklahoma State. Oklahoma State is headed in the wrong direction. They start Garrett Rangel at quarterback tonight. Zane Flores didn't make the trip. This is not the city you want to be in and the team you want to play when you're trying to pick yourself up off the mat. Is this Mike Gundy looking to next season?
If you're not competitive here in this spot, and I wonder when you're going to be. But that said, we talked about this before with K-State when K-State had to go over there. You go all the way to Provo for a night game, and as charged up as that crowd is and as tough as that home field atmosphere is to play in, it's a tough spot, especially to make a first start. But I think the move at quarterback and making the change and all that stuff, I think it's time. And I think you guys have talked about this on the show a little bit yesterday with Utah, with Cam Rising and that injury and that it's maybe just time to kind of move on. I think that's kind of the same thing with Bowman. And obviously with Zane Flores out, going to Rangel, I think is going to be an intriguing thing to watch. But this team has just so many issues beyond that position. And I just want to see some fight. I want to see some fight, and I want to see some execution if you're Oklahoma State. At BYU, on the other hand, I love what they've been defensively. I think Jake Retzloff has done a good job as a quarterback and has made some plays. Overall, I think this is a solid team. And to me, if you're really to be considered one of the favorites to win this conference, which is they're in the position in the standings, then you take care of business and you win this game.
Sam, often when the Big 12 is talked about now, it's Iowa State, BYU, and some might have a different order there. And then K-State's pretty much the automatic number 3. I think after that, you could say Arizona State maybe, but Texas Tech. I mean, they're looking at a likely win tomorrow against Baylor at home. We'll see if they finish it out, but there's every reason to believe that they will. And they'd be 6-1, man. At what point do you start to say, like, this isn't just a schedule thing or a whatever thing? Like, we need to start mentioning them with K-State and BYU and Iowa State.
Yeah, I want to see more consistency on the defensive side of the ball, and we're starting to get it. When we talked about them early in the year and how porous they were on defense, how many explosives they were giving up, and they were still able to win some ball games. Of course, the Wazoo game, they did not. But that was the thing that I think bothered me. But you look at them now, and even though the numbers aren't great defensively, in the red zone, they're pretty good. On third downs, they're pretty good. On takeaways, they're pretty good in conference play. So these last few weeks, they started to get a groove defensively. If you can keep doing that and you can keep Tahj Brooks healthy, then I think this is a team that you have to consider as a conference title contender. I do want to see them win games a little more convincingly. They've all these three last wins that they've had, I think, are all by one score, and they've got this amazing record. What is it, 11-3? In one possession games in the Joey McGuire era? That's really impressive. Can they keep that up? You have to wonder at some point, does that come back to bite them? But if they go in and they handle Baylor by 2 or 3 touchdowns, then I'm convinced they're a team to watch down the stretch.
Yeah, they were fortunate. They played with their food a little bit. And obviously Cincinnati's a pretty good football team, but they played with their food a little bit. And, of course, they were able to, like, clear that Washington State disaster up in Pullman no matter if Brooks played or not. But they do seem to I don't know this for a fact, but the teams that have been winning the Big 12 titles the last 3 to 5 years and maybe forever have been teams that have won the one-score games. TCU, my God, remember that year, and Baylor in 21.
Yeah, TCU is the one that you think about really because how many of those games came down to the wire? You guys remember the one in McLean Stadium where with the fire drill field goal.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, that was one of the most amazing innings I've ever seen. And so you're right. And I think because of the nature of this conference and how competitive it is from top to bottom, you do have to win a lot of close games. Even Texas last year, who won it, they had to tough one out against Houston. They had to tough one out against K-State. They had a one-score game that they lost against Oklahoma. So that's just the nature of this league. The spreads are not going to be really large. You're not going to have like you get in the SEC where you get the number one team against the last team and it's a 45-point spread sometimes. You're not going to get that. And you're just going to have to tough out some games. And for however they've made it work, Texas Tech has figured out a way to do that in the first 3 years of the Joey McGuire era.
Sam, West Virginia up against it this week, too. I mean, they've got to start winning some games. They're still very much in the conference race. They only have one conference loss, but the fan base is starting to turn on Neil Brown. And
as in flying a banner saying fire Neil Brown.
Yeah, they're starting to turn on him. And Kansas State comes in last week after a really, really nice win in coming back and winning on the road against Colorado.
Yeah, it's not going great, and the fans are upset when they're parsing your press conference comments when Neil Brown said the whole thing about, I hope they had a great time. Like, that really infuriated the fans. And when you reach that point, buddy, you're in trouble. So this is a huge spot for them, obviously. And you look at if they can get through this game, you look at the rest of the next few weeks. Arizona on the road, that's a really long road trip, but that's an Arizona team that has not played great. So you think, hey, can you win that one? At Cincinnati is going to be tough, but you got Baylor, you got UCF. So you got a chance, if you're West Virginia, to pick up some momentum if you can squeeze out a win here this week, or at least be competitive and at least play down to the wire with this K-State team down the stretch. But they just have been inconsistent. Garrett Green's numbers aren't there. The turnovers have been an issue. They've got to tighten those things up, because to me, when I watched them last year, when they went 9-4, he was the guy. He was the straw that stirred the drink for them. He's so tough. He kind of a devil may care attitude when you watch him play. He just kind of throws caution to the wind, and you love that about him. But that can come back to bite you if you don't take care of the football.
Biggest game in the country this week is obviously Georgia, Texas, but also Alabama, Tennessee. We know there's no love lost there whatsoever. Sam, they've both kind of had some up and down performances at this point this year. Tennessee very fortunate last weekend against Florida. Your thoughts on a borderline top 10 matchup here between the Vols and Tide?
Yeah, I look at this one as more of a pressure game for the Tide. I feel like every game now after the loss is a pressure game for the Tide, because we're in uncharted territory, because the Kalen DeBoer is not going to get the benefit of the doubt that Nick Saban did. And so even after beating South Carolina last week, because it was as close and came down to the wire in the way it did, Crimson Tide fans are just kind of clenching their teeth because they're used to dominating. And so every game from here on out, to me, I don't think it's fair that it's this way, but it's just the way it is. It's going to be a referendum on Kalen DeBoer. I mean, we got to the point where after the loss 2 weeks ago to Vanderbilt, that they're critiquing the guy's wardrobe, like what he's wearing.
Yeah.
How dare he wear a t-shirt on the sideline? And I'm like, buddy, this is for everybody who ever told you about what it was going to be like when the successor Nick Saban came in and how crazy people were going to get when they lost the game. I think we're getting even beyond that. But this is obviously a big game that's got playoff implications as well for both of these teams. I still give Alabama a little bit of an edge, just because I'm going to trust in Jalen Milroe, big game experience, big game player. And Nico, I think, is super talented, but I just don't think he's all the way there yet. He's only started, I think, is it 9 games that he started? He's still a young quarterback. He's still not all the way matured into the level. So I think this is not a situation like with Vanderbilt where you were going against a veteran quarterback in Diego Pavia, a guy who knew the system. This is a younger quarterback who hasn't had as many of these experiences. So I kind of give Alabama the edge in that way, just because I think Milroe and all those playmakers. And for anybody who hasn't watched them, I'm sure you guys have, but for anybody who hasn't watched Alabama this year, go watch Ryan Williams. Golly, that guy is incredible to watch.
I saw the story on the front page of one of the websites. He should be in high school.
He's 17.
He should be in high school, and here he is, as good a receiver as there is in the country. Paul?
Sam, A&M plays Mississippi State this week. They have been really good. Connor Wegman came back and was fantastic against Mizzou. They were off, and then now they're back to action. This has not been the most favorable series to A&M. I think 8-8 all time. And of those 8 losses, especially the ones that have come since they've joined the SEC, they're always at the worst time. This one is there. Mississippi State is playing with an untested quarterback and kind of held their own for a minute against Georgia last week. Is this the definition of trap game for a confident Aggies team?
100%, because you got LSU on the other end coming to Kyle Field in 2 weeks. So, or week and a half, I should say. This is a game that 2 weeks ago last week when they beat Mizzou the way they did, I looked at it and I thought, man, A&M's going to go in there and cruise and dominate Mississippi State because we know how bad they look. And then you watch how Michael Van Buren and that offense looked against Georgia. They were hitting shots downfield. They were winning one-on-ones against Georgia's DBs, which Georgia has elite secondary players. This is a Mississippi State team that A&M cannot afford to take lightly, because now you're halfway into the season. Your freshman quarterback has started a few games now that Shapen's been out, and I think they're starting to at least understand and build some confidence and understand what they're doing. That's part of the thing with the transition. Same thing we saw with Houston. Houston struggled so mightily in their first few weeks, and then they got the win against TCU. It takes a little time. I think we take that for granted, especially in the portal era when you've got so many players who are new. Now that they've kind of figured out, you build some confidence by going toe-to-toe with one of the top teams in America, and it's Starkville, and it's all those cowbells. It's an SEC road environment. And like you said, I remember 2016, I think it was, Texas A&M was number 4 in the playoff rankings in the first week of the rankings unveil. And then that very Saturday, they went to Starkville, and they got beat by, I think it was Nick Fitzgerald, and their playoff hopes went down the tubes. So this is a huge spot. And to me, if you're A&M and you go take care of business and you dominate, you go into that LSU game with a lot of momentum. And now I think people are talking about you as a dark horse playoff team.
Sam, if you don't mind, it's a college athletics question. The Tony Bennett retirement at Virginia, and he had his press conference. There's been, there's people looking at both sides. One, thank God it's not health-related, but, man, this kind of sucks on the eve of the season. We've maybe seen a college coach or two leave a little bit early. But this timing was so bizarre. Like somebody said, basketball hasn't changed since he signed his new deal in June and players entered the portal to join his squad. What were your thoughts about this one?
Yeah, I think just like a lot of these things, there's a lot of nuance to it. My gut reaction is, yeah, it's really sucks for the players because they're locked in because you're already in school. So you're not going to be able to transfer somewhere else before the season starts. We're very close to the season starting. And I think he said it, at least from the press conference quotes that I saw on social media earlier, it sounded like he wanted to give his assistant the best chance at the job. I get that, and I respect that loyalty to your guys, but you are not the athletic director. You are not the one to make that decision. Yes, this is your basketball program because you coach it, but this is Virginia basketball. This is not Tony Bennett basketball.
There you go.
So I think while I understand why he did it, and I certainly empathize and I understand trying to do right by your coaches and your staff, it puts the kids in a bad position and it puts the administration in a tough spot because you're essentially forcing their hand the way you wanted to. Now, I will say this. If you truly thought that you're done and you just don't have it in you to do it, it's unfair to stay and it's unfair to keep coaching the kids because if you're not in it, you want to give as much as you're getting paid, you need to give 100% of yourself to that job and to those players and the rest of your staff. If you're not able to do that, step away. But yeah, I don't love the timing of it because of what it does to the kids, but I'd rather you be upfront and be honest about it and tell us what you're trying to do. And I'm not a fan of it, but I also understand where he's coming from.
Yeah, and he said that. He did bring that up. He just didn't feel like he could continue with the way things are. But, hey, it's his career. He can make that decision, but a lot of people are affected by that, as you mentioned. Sam, great stuff. Enjoy being able to just with all 7 of those flat screens in front of you on your man cave, enjoy all of them. It's great to always have you on the show. We appreciate you, man. Love the work you do.
Thank you so much, guys. Y'all take care.
Sam Kahn, theathletic.com, with us on 365 Sports.